What would you do if the man you trusted with your entire life turned out to be living a completely different one? Just 20 minutes away from your front door. Not a suspicion, not a gut feeling, but actual proof spilling right out of a box crashing onto the floor of your own home. That's exactly what happened to a woman named Claire. And once she saw what was inside that box, there was no going back. Daniel always left on Sunday evenings. Never a big goodbye, never a real hug. He'd grab his Navy travel bag, the one Claire had gifted him on their 4th anniversary, back when she still picked things out with love, and he'd say the same few words every time. I'll be back by Friday. Maybe sooner. I'll text you when I land. A quick brush of his lips against her cheek, like signing a form, and then the door would shut behind him. Claire would stand in the hallway listening to his footsteps fade down the staircase. And every week she told herself this was just what marriage looked like after a while. Comfortable, quiet, settled. They had been together for 9 years. They met at a mutual friend's gathering. Daniel had shown up soaked from the rain, cracking jokes all night that made Claire laugh until her stomach hurt. He worked in construction management, always on some job site, always with a story to tell. She was a bookkeeper at a local medical office. Life was simple, and Daniel had slipped into it like he had always been there. The first few years were real. Summer road trips to a little rented cabin by the water. Stupid arguments about toothpaste caps and running late. Making up over warm donuts he'd show up with out of nowhere, holding the box like a white flag. Late nights talking in the dark. Claire falling asleep feeling like someone was truly beside her. Then slowly, without any single dramatic moment, something started to drain away. Daniel moved to a bigger corporate firm. Travel picked up. He started coming home later, sharing less. When Claire asked how his day went, the answers got shorter and shorter. Fine. Tired. Let's talk later. Eventually she stopped asking. They learned to exist side by side like 2 books on the same shelf. Not in each other's way, but not touching either. Evenings meant him on the couch scrolling his phone, her watching something in the kitchen on her tablet. Weekends meant him in the garage doing nothing in particular with the car. Dinners were quiet. Not hostile quiet. Just empty quiet. The kind where you wait for something you can't name. Her friend Lisa asked her once over coffee, "Claire, are you okay? You seem so distant lately." Claire said yes without missing a beat. And it felt exactly the same as every other yes she'd been giving Daniel for years. Maybe that was the moment she should have listened to herself. But she didn't. Not yet. On a Monday in early spring, Claire took the day off to get through a pile of neglected chores. Winter coats to pack away. Windows to wash. That storage closet off the hallway, the one Daniel always called his territory, to finally clean out. That closet had been his domain for years. Don't mess with my system in there. I'll organize it when I get a chance. She had heard that so many times it had just become part of the background noise of her life. 1 year passed. 2. 5. But something was different that Monday. Maybe she was just tired of that phrase. Maybe she needed to reclaim one small corner of the apartment. Whatever it was, she opened the closet door, flipped on the flickering bulb, and climbed up on the step stool. Tools on the bottom shelf. A row of old pickle jars in the middle. His mother's recipes, cloudy brine. Things nobody had ever opened. And on the top shelf, pushed way behind 2 dusty cardboard boxes, something she had never noticed. Something flat. Metallic. Cold. She reached for it carefully, but it was heavier than it looked. Her fingers slipped, and the tin box tumbled down, hit the hardwood floor with a hollow crash, and the lid popped right off. Photographs. Papers. A small keychain with a little stuffed bear, and a folded piece of notebook paper with a child's drawing on it. Claire stepped down from the stool and knelt on the floor. The first photograph showed Daniel in an old gray t-shirt she thought they'd thrown out years ago. He was smiling, not that polite, tired half-smile she'd gotten used to, but a wide-open, genuine smile she hadn't seen in years. Standing next to him was a woman in her early 30s, brunette, soft features, dimples. She was leaning her head on his shoulder, and cradled in Daniel's arms was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a Santa hat with a pom-pom. Behind them a Christmas tree, blinking lights, tinsel. The second photo, summer. The same little girl in a sundress, braid coming loose, laughing with her whole body. Daniel was holding her hand in a park, looking down at her with an expression Claire recognized immediately, even though she had never, not once, seen him look that way at anyone else. Pure, unfiltered tenderness. She picked up the notebook paper. A child's drawing. Lopsided house. Yellow sun. 3 stick figures. And below them, in wobbly, careful letters, the handwriting of someone still learning how letters are shaped, the words, "Daddy Daniel, I love you." If only she had stayed off that stool. But she hadn't. And now there was no one seeing any of it. Claire sat on the floor of that closet for a long time. The bulb flickered. The wall clock in the kitchen ticked. She wasn't crying. She was waiting to cry because it seemed like the logical thing to do. But instead of tears, what came was something else entirely. A cold, almost surgical clarity, like she had been peering through foggy glass for years, accepting the blur as normal, and someone had just wiped it completely clean. She carried the box to the kitchen table and spent the next hour going through every single item, the way she went through financial reports at work. Methodical. Systematic. A residential lease agreement. 2 bedrooms. 3rd floor. Tenant, Daniel. Address, Maplewood Avenue. A street in the next suburb over. The one with the little farmer's market where Claire liked to buy heirloom tomatoes in the summer. Lease term, 5 years, renewed 3 times. Last renewal January. Receipts from a children's clothing store. Toddler boots size 5. A pink backpack with a unicorn on it. A watercolor paint set. Dates from the previous week. And a greeting card with painted flowers on the cover. Inside, in a slightly tired feminine handwriting, "We're waiting for you. We miss you. You're girls." Claire closed the lid and set the box down. Then she lay in the dark that night, staring at the ceiling, doing the math. 6 years. The lease was first signed 6 years ago. 3 years before the business trips became constant. Which meant that when they were still talking late into the night, when they were still visiting his mother on weekends, when Claire had convinced herself they were just going through a rough patch, he was already renting a separate apartment in the next town and living a completely parallel life. She thought about the night 4 years ago when she had finally worked up the courage to say, "Daniel, don't you think we should start thinking about having a baby? I'm 33. Time isn't exactly waiting." He had put down his phone, looked at her with perfect calm and said, "Babe, now's not the right time. We need to build up our savings first. Let's revisit this in a couple of years." She had agreed. She always agreed. His logic always sounded so reasonable, so thoughtful, like a man planning for their future. But now she understood. When he gave her that speech, the little girl in the photograph would have been about 1 year old. By morning, something inside Claire had shifted, and it had no intention of going back to where it was. She got dressed, looked at herself in the hallway mirror for a long moment. Her face was the same lines at the corners of her eyes, same low bun. But her eyes looked different, like someone who had already made a decision but hadn't said it out loud yet. She typed the address from the lease into a rideshare app. The drive took about 20 minutes through streets she almost knew. Past the farmer's market, down narrower roads, past brick buildings with small front yards and blooming dogwood trees. The car stopped. She got out. 4-story red brick building. Fresh black railings. A yellow swing set in the courtyard. A plastic bucket forgotten in the sandbox. On the 2nd floor balcony, a planter box of geraniums, bright red against the brick. She walked in. The stairwell smelled like roast chicken and something floral. Someone had left a potted violet on the window ledge between floors. 3rd floor left door. A welcome mat. A white doorbell. Claire pressed it. Quick, light footsteps from inside. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened. The woman from the photographs was standing right there. Up close, she looked both younger and older than in the pictures. No makeup, pale skin, the kind of dark circles that appear when you haven't slept well in a long time but have stopped noticing. A dark green cardigan with frayed elbows. Hair in a messy clip sliding to one side. She looked at Claire for 2-3 seconds, and then without fear, without anger, with something that looked almost like recognition, she said, "You're his wife." Not a question. "Yes," Claire said. From down the hallway, cartoons played on a TV. The woman took a step back. "Come in." The hallway was narrow, little kids' shoes piled on the mat, a pink umbrella in the corner, tiny jackets on the coat rack, 1 adult, 2 child-sized. In the kitchen, a table pushed against the window, 2 stools, a pot of wilting petunias on the sill, drawings held to the fridge with a ladybug magnet. The woman sat down across from Claire and pressed her trembling fingers flat against the wood tabletop to force them still. "My name is Serena," she said, "though you probably already know that." "No," Claire replied. "I didn't know anything. Not until yesterday." Serena nodded slowly, looked out at the courtyard below where children were kicking a soccer ball, and began to talk. Her voice was steady without drama. The voice of someone telling a story they've told themselves many times before, privately in the dark. She was 32. She had met Daniel 7 years ago through work. She was an account manager at a building supply company. He came in representing a contractor. Charming, easy, that smile. He told her from the start that he was married, but that the marriage had been dead for a long time, that it was complicated to separate. Joint assets, shared debts. He'd always say a specific deadline, after the holidays, once we pay off the credit cards, in about 6 months, and that deadline would always get pushed. She waited. At first she believed him, then she just got used to believing him. "Those are two very different things," Serena said. "If you know what I mean." When she got pregnant, he said it would finally push things forward. That now he had a real reason. Their daughter Sophie was born. The deadlines kept moving. He came by twice a week, stayed over, left in the mornings. He said his wife barely noticed he was gone anymore. That they lived like roommates. Claire sat across from her, listening to a woman describe her own life from the other side of a wall. And she thought, we were both stupid. We both believed him. We both waited. He just gave each of us a different version of the same lie. Then Serena stood up, went to the bedroom, and came back with a blue cardboard folder. 3 days earlier, she'd found a piece of paper in Daniel's coat pocket. A phone number. A woman's name. Not Claire's. After that, Serena had finally gone through the folder Daniel kept at her apartment. Work documents. He had called them, said there was no room at home. She placed it on the table. Claire opened it. Her hands didn't shake. She actually noticed that about herself, and filed it away with quiet amazement. First, printed bank statements. Their joint checking account, the one Daniel's paycheck went into, the one Claire transferred her half into every month for the mortgage and groceries. Money had been wired out of it 2 to 3 times a month for 18 months straight, directly into an account in Serena's name. "I thought it was his money," Serena said. "He said it was side jobs, bonuses. I never checked where it came from." Second, an email chain between Daniel and a friend named Marcus who worked in auto sales. Daniel was asking how to sell a car registered in his wife's name without her knowledge or signature. Claire thought of her gray sedan, the one she bought with her own money, title in her name, because it was easier for her insurance. Daniel drove it more than she did. She never minded. Third, a torn piece of notebook paper covered in Daniel's handwriting, that small left-leaning slant she used to find charming. Written on it was a specific dollar amount, the exact sum Claire had received 3 months ago from the sale of her grandmother's old farmhouse upstate. A crumbling cabin, some apple trees, all that was left of the woman who had raised her after her mother died. Claire had hesitated for a long time before selling it. Daniel had asked casually over dinner, "So what did the place go for?" She told him. He nodded and went back to his phone. That number was on the paper now, with the date of the deposit and a thick question mark, traced over twice. He knew. He was planning how to get to it. Claire closed the folder. "Can I take this?" she asked. "Take everything," Serena said. "I don't need it anymore." What came next? Claire handled the way she handled everything that actually mattered to her. With precision, without panic, and without waiting for anyone's permission. That same afternoon she called the bank. Transferred every dollar from the joint account into her personal savings. Froze Daniel's debit card. Suspected unauthorized access, she told the rep. It wasn't even a lie. Then she changed her passwords, called a divorce attorney her friend Lisa had used and highly recommended. "He doesn't cry with you, he just gets it done," and laid out the situation in full. By the time she hung up, she had a to-do list with 5 bullet points and every one of them had a path forward. She filed a temporary freeze on all marital assets. She pulled 3 years of bank statements. She gathered every document related to the car, the apartment purchased 2 years before the wedding in her name alone with her own money, and her grandmother's inheritance. She had it all scanned onto a USB drive and tucked into her purse by Thursday. When Daniel walked through the door on Friday afternoon, suitcase dropped in the corner, jacket tossed on the hook, shoes kicked off without untying the laces, he called out from the hallway just like always. "Anna, I'm back. Is there anything to eat?" He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, turned toward the table and froze. The tin box was open in the center of the table. Photographs fanned out like a deck of cards. The blue folder beside it, thick and organized. And Claire sitting across from it all, hands folded quietly in her lap. He didn't speak. She did. "Sit down." One by one she laid it all out. The Christmas photo. The summer park photo. Sophie's drawing, "Daddy Daniel, I love you." The lease. The receipts. The card that said, "We miss you, your girls." The bank statements. The emails about her car. The paper with her grandmother's inheritance amount and the double question mark. The whole table was covered by the time she was done. He stared at it. Then he tried to explain. Then he tried anger. "You went through my closet. I told you not to mess with my stuff. You had no right." But the anger collapsed almost immediately, because they both knew it was ridiculous. A man standing over a broken vase holding a hammer, screaming that he didn't do it. He dropped his face into his hands. "I got lost, Claire. I love you both. Sophie's a little girl, I couldn't just abandon her. Just give me time, I'll explain everything." She waited for the familiar softness to come, that old yielding reflex that had made her agree and accommodate for 9 years. But it wasn't there. The inside of her was quiet, like a room that had been emptied of all its furniture, every sound bouncing cleanly off bare walls. "You weren't building a marriage," she said. Her voice was completely steady. "You were building an exit. You were siphoning money. You were trying to sell my car. You tracked my inheritance. That's not getting lost. That's a strategy." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his face. He was seeing her maybe for the first time in years. Not as someone to manage. Not as someone who would eventually back down. As a person who knew exactly who he was and would never be fooled by him again. She stood up, gathered the documents, stacked them neatly and slid them back into the folder. She set a business card on the table. Her attorney's number. "The apartment is mine, purchased before the marriage. The car is mine, title in my name. The joint account is at 0. If you have questions about anything else, call Mr. Lawson." And she walked out of the kitchen. The divorce took 4 months. Daniel stalled where he could. His attorney filed delays, requested extensions, demanded appraisals. Standard tactics meant to exhaust the other party into giving up. Claire didn't give up and she didn't settle. Her attorney came to every hearing with a mountain of paper. The judge, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses and the eyes of someone who had seen every version of this story, reviewed the bank statements, the wire transfers, the emails, and said nothing out loud. But the way she squared that stack of papers on her desk made everything perfectly clear. Daniel got nothing. Not the car. Not the apartment. Not a single dollar he hadn't earned on his own. He started calling after the first court session. Morning, evening, different tones each time. Pleading, annoyed, nostalgic, calm. Like a man trying different keys on a lock that had already been changed. Claire answered exactly once. "Everything I had to say, I've already said." After that, she let it ring and watched his name light up the screen until it went dark. She was amazed at how little it meant to her now. For months ago it still meant something. Now it was just Pickles. He stopped calling in the 4th month. A week later he signed the settlement. It was finalized on a cold Thursday morning that smelled like floor wax. Claire took her copy, walked out the double doors, stood at the top of the steps in the freezing drizzle, tilted her head back for a few seconds, and then tucked the envelope into her bag and walked to the train. She heard the rest of the story in pieces, from mutual acquaintances, from chance encounters. The night Claire had confronted him, Daniel had gone straight to Serena's apartment with his suitcase, no warning. When Serena opened the door and saw the luggage and the panic on his face, she understood immediately. He started talking fast. "She kicked me out, we're getting divorced, I'm moving in here for real now, this is what you wanted." And Serena stood in the doorway and looked at this man she had waited for, fantasized about, made excuses for across 6 years. And she thought, this isn't a choice. This is a man running out of a burning building and diving into the nearest open window. You're not here because you want to be, she said quietly. You're here because you have nowhere else to go. The next day, she packed his things into 2 duffel bags, carried them to the lobby, told the building super they were Daniel's, and went back upstairs. He buzzed her apartment repeatedly that afternoon. She didn't answer. Then little Sophie's voice crackled through the intercom. Mommy, who is it? And Serena said, Nobody, sweetheart. Wrong apartment. He ended up on a sagging futon in his friend's spare bedroom, living out of those 2 bags, spending his nights scrolling through old photos of Sophie that Megan had once texted him when things were good. He sat on a bench in Serena's courtyard for 2 hours one afternoon, waiting for them to come outside. Sophie spotted him from the window and waved. He waved back. Then Serena pulled the blinds shut. Claire heard that part of the story at the grocery store, from an acquaintance who knew Daniel. She nodded, paid for her bread and oranges, walked out into a warm late spring afternoon, and thought about Sophie waving at her dad through a window before the blinds closed. She thought, this story doesn't have a happy ending, only different degrees of sad ones. And then she realized something else. It wasn't her story anymore. She was entirely free of it. That autumn, Claire tackled the storage closet one final Saturday morning. Old jeans, a faded t-shirt, hair tied back with a bandana. First thing she did was unscrew that flickering bulb she had tolerated for 2 years. She walked to the bathroom cabinet, grabbed a brand new LED bulb, and screwed it in. The closet flooded with bright, steady, clear light. For the first time, she saw the whole space without a single shadow. She threw out the cardboard boxes, the broken lampshade, the tangled extension cords. She opened every one of his mother's pickle jars, 3 years old, lids rusted, brine long gone cloudy, and dumped them all down the drain. She packed the tools into a crate. She wiped every shelf down 3 times until the rags stopped turning gray. She scrubbed the walls, scrubbed the floor. Underneath the years of grime, the linoleum was a cheerful light beige. She had forgotten its original color. Then she began placing her own things on the clean shelves. A box of her photographs, not wedding albums, not a single picture with Daniel in it. Her own history, childhood Polaroids, pictures of her and her sister at their grandmother's upstate farmhouse. Her mother as a young woman, grandmother standing under the apple trees. High school yearbooks with soft, well-loved pages. A small velvet box holding her grandmother's silver and turquoise earrings. A stack of her favorite hardcovers, pages wavy from being read so many times. And on the bottom shelf, 3 quart-sized jars of peach preserves. She had made them herself over the summer, for the first time in her life, following a recipe she found online. They came out a little too sweet. Her sister swore they were perfect stirred into hot tea. Claire stepped back into the hallway and looked. The closet was small, bright, and completely clean. It smelled like pine cleaner and faintly warmly of peaches. Every single thing on those shelves belonged to her. Not a trace of anyone else. Not one foreign object. She stood there thinking about how just 6 months ago, she had been balanced on a step stool in this exact spot, reaching past those cloudy pickle jars, and how a metal box had crashed to the floor and cracked her world cleanly in half. Not because of a fight. Not because of a dramatic confession. Because of a cheap tin box hidden behind homemade pickles in a closet she had been told, for years, to stay out of. She could have stayed off that stool. She could have kept respecting his territory. She could have gone on for another year, 5, in that dim flickering half-light, mistaking it for a marriage. But she climbed up, and the box fell. At the worst possible time or at exactly the right moment. She still wasn't entirely sure which. Maybe it was both. She switched off the new bright light and closed the door. The latch clicked shut. The kitchen was full of afternoon sun, golden and warm, catching the red geraniums on the windowsill she had bought over the summer simply because she saw them at the nursery and thought, "Those are beautiful. I want them." She hadn't asked anyone's permission. She hadn't texted anyone to see if it was okay. She poured herself a mug of tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and wrapped both hands around the warm ceramic. Outside, the autumn trees were turning gold. Somewhere below, a child laughed, that full, unguarded belly laugh that only small children manage. On the bench by the lobby doors, the old neighbor was gossiping with a friend. The faint words drifted up. You have to water the roots, not just complain about the leaves. An ordinary afternoon in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary life. Except now entirely, completely, truly it was hers. If you've ever felt like you were living in someone else's version of your own story, remember. The truth has a way of falling right into your hands. Sometimes it takes a step stool and a dusty old closet. But when it comes all the way. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories just like this. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we deserve the whole truth.